You're listening to Just My Show, your number one source for pop culture.
So the website 80s Movies Rewind gives Back to School a rewind factor of 9, which is absolutely true. It's one of these movies that you catch on TV and you just watch it every single time, and you forget just how funny it is. Why is it so rewatchable?
Well, I think it's rewatchable, I guess, because the themes are pretty, universal. I mean, everybody's struggled through school. Everybody's got weird, screwed up relationships with their parents. Everybody's got that thing with usually their father even more than the mother, where he's both embarrassing and wonderful. And then it's rewatchable because Rodney's so damn funny and the script is so damn funny. For me, the kind of unsung hero of that movie is really Harold Ramis, because when I was first hired, the script was by a couple of other young writers, and it was fine, but it was nowhere near as funny or as insane or as special as the final script was. And then they brought Harold in to do a rewrite, and that kind of elevated the whole thing to a whole other level, both in terms of being funnier and in terms of having more of a heart at its center. And I think that's what's unusual about the film, is that it's really wacky and absurd and silly and stupid and wonderful on that level, but then it also has a heart underneath it all, which I think lets you kind of get involved with them as characters as well as with just, Rodney actually acts in the movie, which is amazing because he's not an actor, but he's, really good. That moment where he kind of does the poem about not going, do not go blindly to that good night. He's really good, and that to me adds a whole other layer to the movie.
Speaking of Rodney, when I talked with Bert, he actually surprised me a little bit. I asked him about Rodney, and he said he liked him very much, but he actually wasn't as funny off camera as he expected, and he said he was kind of a pain in the ass. I certainly don't want to sit here and start saying bad things about Rodney Dangerfield. The guy's a legend, but what was your experience like with Rodney?
Well, I think Bert's exactly right. I think Rodney was not a happy person. I think Rodney was kind of a sad guy. We all know that cliche about the sad clown, and I think Rodney was that, and I think a number of comics probably are that way, but I think Rodney really was that. He was a guy who had a very hard life. I think his whole shtick, which was so brilliantly funny, if I don't get any respect, I think that's really how he felt in the world. I think Rodney was a little paranoid. I think he felt like people didn't respect him. I think he felt like people didn't take him seriously. I think he struggled for so many years to get successful that I think there was part of him that always was waiting for it to get taken away again. So, he could be prickly, and even more than that, he was just kind of, a sad guy, and he used that sadness and turned it into humor, which is an amazing thing to do. But it's funny, it's a weird thing about performers. Sometimes you'll meet actors who play like these really serious roles all the time, and they're like completely wacky and funny people. And then you'll meet the funniest comic actors, and they're completely serious and depressed and sad. And so often what we see of somebody on screen is sort of their reverse, their mirror image. It's them the way they kind of wish they could be. And I think there's maybe some of that was true about Rodney.
So this movie, I can't believe I'm saying this, has been 20 years this past summer that the movie hit theaters. Looking back now, how 80s does this film seem to you?
Well, it's funny. To me, it seems completely 80s. The music and the clothes and there's so many trappings that were very specific to a time. And even, Rodney as a cultural icon was sort of at his peak at that point. And Robert Downey was first kind of emerging into everybody's consciousness at that moment. And so it's sort of, the whole thing is very, very 80s in a way. On the other hand, what's interesting is, because I live near UCLA, and I'm always meeting college kids who saw the movie for the first time, and they were 3 years old in the 80s. They don't have any frame of reference to the 80s, and they relate to it not as a period piece, but to them they're sort of so getting into the humor of it that the stuff that's sort of very period about it doesn't seem to, that's never what people say about it. They never say, it's so weird, it's such a thing of another time. So I think a lot of it depends on perspective. To an old guy like me, I look at it and I go, oh yeah, there's my lost youth in terms of the time frame. But I think for young people, it doesn't seem to be the first thing that hits them. It's not, for example, I think Legend of Billie Jean, which is this other movie I was in, which very, very few people have ever seen, arguably not such a bad thing that they haven't. But that movie to me seems much more almost comically of a time. Everything about that movie screams out its moment in time. Back to School, yeah, the time is there in the trappings, but somehow not in the story. The story, I think, transcends a particular moment in time.
All right, so Back to School was set at the fictional Grand Lake College, of course home to the Grand Lake Hooters, the only diving team in the country that I know of that has cheerleaders. But the film was actually done on the set on the campus of University of Wisconsin. What was that like, filming on a real college campus? It must have been a big deal for the students there. Did you interact with them? Did you get to do any partying? I know it's a long work day, but
yeah, it was a blast. I mean, we were in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a great town. I mean, that's a really, really cool town. And people were wonderful. I mean, the students were involved and around, and a lot of them were extras in the movie, and we had production assistants who were students, and they were definitely interested in what was going on. But it didn't feel, it was just very comfortable. I don't know what it was about the way they had it set up, but I ended up hanging out with the students a lot, but it didn't feel weird. It wasn't like we were the Hollywood folks. I mean, it seemed like after only a few days, we were just there too. The first few days there was like this whole strange, like nobody could talk to anybody feeling, and then after a while it was like, oh, those are just those people making the movie, and suddenly we weren't weird or special, and so then they could just hang out and talk with us. And yeah, I mean, I didn't do a lot of partying just because that was never my personality that much, and I was also, living with a woman at the time, so I wasn't sort of going out trying to get laid, which, at other points in my life I probably would have been spending a lot of energy doing. But I certainly did hang out with people, and we'd get food, or we'd, have a beer and talk, and people were just really, really nice. I really liked the town, and I liked just the atmosphere. I'd walk into town and go to the market and buy food, and just, it's a sweet place, and it's amazing when you live in LA and you forget that there's still smaller cities and towns where people don't lock their doors and know each other, and Madison has some of that feeling.
A very memorable scene, of course, in the movie is when you answer the door to find Kurt Vonnegut there to help your dad with his homework on Kurt Vonnegut. It's hard to tell. The way it's cut, it looks like Kurt may not have been there with you. Was he actually on set with you for that?
Oh, no, he absolutely was. Oh, yeah. No, he actually spent the day there. And Kurt actually was a huge fan of Rodney's, which is, I think, part of why he did the movie. Kurt thought Rodney was hysterical. And they actually got along really well. I mean, they were like these two crazy old guys, and they just went off and talked in the corner for like a lot of the day that we were shooting, and were just cracking each other up, and they got along famously because Kurt, for all his being this intellectual writer, he's also like a guy who loves to just sit around and tell dirty jokes. And I mean, part of what's wonderful about Kurt is he's sort of like the great uncle that you wish you had. He's very funny, he's very relaxed, and he loves slapstick comedy. I mean, his heroes like Laurel and Hardy are two of his big heroes. So he really appreciated Rodney, and I think that was why he did the movie. I don't think they paid him a lot of money or anything. I think he did it because he just thought Rodney was hysterically funny.
For more, go to www.justmyshow.com.